you, Lynn. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you, Sergey, for helping to set this up. And I would like to express a not only heartfelt gratitude for those friends and colleagues who have joined this, who I've known about for many, many years, but also especially to those of you from Ukraine who have uh, uh, joined this call and are really uh, on a kind of front line of conflict resolution. And what I'd like to suggest is that that front line extends not only through Ukraine and through other nations around the world, through the Middle East, through Africa, through right now India and Pakistan, and a variety of other places. At a deeper and more subtle level, it extends through every single one of us. Um, and what we are going to be looking at is um, a deep understanding of what it is that conflict resolution is about. Um, Before we begin, I would like us to acknowledge that we are here today because people in Ukraine and throughout the Middle East and Sudan and Democratic Republic of Congo and various other countries around the world are dying. And they are dying in part because we have lacked the skills that we are here today to learn. So I would like us not to forget those who have died, but invite them to join us and allow their memory to guide our work here today. Let's dedicate our conversation to them so that perhaps through our efforts, fewer people will die in days to come. So let's consecrate our work to them and understand that it is always possible, no matter how skilled we are, to improve our understanding and our level of expertise in working with conflict. But I'd like to start actually with a different idea. And that is essentially this. In the first place, I am not here to tell you how to mediate. I'm here to tell you what I've learned over the course of the last 45 years of mediation. Um, and some of this may be helpful to you, and other parts of what I will be saying are not helpful to you. This course belongs to you. If whatever it is that we are talking about is not helpful to you, stop the conversation and ask a question that allows us to address the issues that are important to you. So not only does this conversation we are about to have belong to you, the materials that you have received also belong to you. They are yours. Steal them. So I am coming to conflict resolution from a culture that has a particular approach and attitude toward conflict. And every culture in the world is different. And we not only have large cultures like the culture that exists in the United States or in Ukraine, we have smaller cultures, cultures that exist within communities, subcultures, cultures that exist, um, and individual cultures. And so, what we have to think about is what is the relationship between culture and conflict? And I'd like to start by giving you a very simple definition of culture. It is the way that we attribute meaning to what happens around us. And what we can therefore see is that every conflict is in part cross-cultural because everybody has a different interpretation of the meaning of whatever it is that has happened. There is obviously an enormous cultural difference between Russians and Ukrainians, There is an enormous cultural difference inside the United States between red states and blue states, between people who are college educated and those who are not, between those who believe in science and those who are suspicious of it. And what we can see is that there is something deep and profound that is taking place in connection with this with conflict that it's possible for us to learn something important about. A last point, I'd like us to consider the following really beautiful statement by the Greek novelist Nikos Kazantzakis. Here's what he said. Alexia, you will maybe recognize this. He said, in quotes, by believing passionately in something that still does not exist, we create it. The non-existent is whatever we have not sufficiently desired. And what I mean to say by that is that we create possibilities in conflict resolution by imagining them. And a part of the role of the mediator and a part of the success of the mediator is the ability to discover, using empathy, what it is that the parties most deeply and passionately desire, and then find some way of connecting those two sets of desires to one another. And here's the place where I think it is important to introduce a kind of fundamental idea about conflict resolution. And it comes out of science, and the idea in science is known as fractal organization. And what a fractal is defined as in science is something that is self-similar on all scales. So if you look at a mountain range, it looks somewhat similar up close and far away. And the same goes for a coastline. And the same goes for conflict. And what this means is that it is possible for us to translate what we learn at an interpersonal level, what we learn even internally inside of us as we work through our conflicts, onto a global political scale in working with the heads of nation states. And it is possible similarly to find something similar in warfare, in tariffs, in all kinds of conflicts that take place on a grand global scale. And what happens in marriages? What happens in families? This doesn't mean that they're identical, and it doesn't mean that there is a one-to-one correspondence between those so that you can simply move from one to the other. What it means is that with a proper understanding of the differences, it is possible to take what works on a small scale and turn it into something that is possible to be successful on a larger scale. Now, it's this possibility also that we have to understand and recognize something important about. So here's a second piece that I want to suggest to you. And it comes out of some of the materials that I've sent to you. I think of it as a set of philosophical propositions. I'm going to give you three of them. Here are three philosophical ideas. And incidentally, please stop me if I'm speaking too fast. If you don't understand something, please raise your hand, put something in the chat, and I will rely on Sergey to tell me if there's something in the chat perhaps that I need to pay attention to. So here are three philosophical propositions. One, no two people are the same. Not in the history of the human race have there ever been two human beings who are the same. Number two, No single human being is the same from one moment to the next. We are all changing all the time. Number three, conflicts are complex, multi-determined, multifaceted, chaotic, moving rapidly in unexpected ways, undergoing deep transformations that we do not understand. And as a consequence of these three philosophical propositions, I'll tell you how to mediate. Nor can you tell me or anyone else how to mediate. Nor can you mediate the way that I do, nor can I mediate the way that you do. And so what it means is that there is no single way forward. We have to create the way forward step by step at each moment. And now here are three opposite philosophical propositions. One, yes, everybody is different, but at the same time, we are all actually remarkably similar across cultures, across races, across religions, across historical periods. There's something human in all of us. Number two, yes, every one of us is different from moment to moment, and yet there is something consistent in us that has been present since our birth and that will be present until we die. And number three, yes, conflicts are complex, multidimensional, multi-determined, multifaceted, chaotic, and at the same time, there is something um, uh, uh, that is that we are capable of understanding and appreciating about conflict that is present in virtually every conflict. Now, what does this mean? What it means is that we can talk about conflict resolution in a way that makes sense, that is useful to you. And at the same time, we can't tell you exactly how to use it. You have to discover that for yourself. So every human being, every mediator mediates just a little bit differently. And every mediation has something successful in it and something that is not quite so successful, something that may work a second time and may not work. So here's how it has operated for me in thousands and thousands of mediations over 45 years. The very thing that I do that is successful at 9:51 fails at 9:53. And the very thing that failed at 9:53 by 9:55 becomes successful again. What happened? The answer is that I have tracked the conflict so closely inside of myself using empathy as a guide to what other people are experiencing, that I am able to anticipate where it is headed based on an understanding of how conflict resolution works. And then basically, I make a guess. In mathematics, this is called Bayesian logic. I make an approximation, and then I try something and see what happens. And then I try something else and see what happens. And so the whole process of mediation is a process of calibrating our empathy and our intuition, our capacity for guesswork, and then trying things out and seeing what works and what doesn't. Or to put it slightly differently, I can say that what entitles me to be here with you, talking to you about conflict resolution, is that I have failed way more often than you have. And every single failure is one that hopefully leads us towards whatever that moment is, that little moment of magic, when all of a sudden something deep, fundamental, and profound shifts. So, the title of my latest book, which is the title of what we are talking about today, is The Magic in Mediation. And what I would like to suggest is that that magic is present as a possibility in every single conflict at every single moment. And all that we are doing is waiting until we get close enough to be able, or just perhaps even by accident, reach out and touch that conflict in the right way. And what is the right way to touch a conflict? The answer is from inside of ourselves outward. Let me put it slightly differently. This is heart work. And we can think of what we do as being mentally um, challenging. There is certainly a physical aspect of conflict, which consists of how conflicts impact us in our bodies and how we can use our bodies to communicate with each other through nonverbal language, nonverbal forms of communication, how we can signal to each other using symbols and gestures what our intentions are. And those may be powerful, and we haven't explored those nearly adequately enough. Secondly, conflicts exist on a mental plane. That is, they consist of disagreements over issues. And we can process those disagreements, discover how it is that people come into those disagreements and what we might be able to do about them. And notice that the first set of techniques having to do with what happens inside the body has nothing whatsoever to do with settling the issues, with talking about what those issues are, and do that and never once appreciate the fact that every conflict exists also on an emotional level. And now what we do with conflict in its emotional location is fundamentally different from what we do with conflict in its mental location. It has to be. It's a fundamentally different form of process. You require a different set of skills, if you will, a more advanced set of skills. And the same goes as we continue to recognize all of the various locations that conflict exists at. And the deepest one can be found very simply by asking a question of anybody in conflict. And the question is, why do you care so deeply? And what kind of question that is that? That is a heart-based question. That is a question that is designed to elicit what people care about and why. And when we open that kind of conversation with people, we discover that we require skills on a whole different level. Even the emotional intelligence skills that Lynn mentioned before are not sufficient to make us skillful when it comes to what it is that people most when they are in conflict. What is it that they most want? In my experience, it is a heart-to-heart conversation with the person who hurt them, the person they don't trust. Because a part of conflict under the surface is not only the fear and the anger and the pain, but the desire for it to be different. And desire is a heart process. So mediation has a heart element as well. And this is the place where it seems to me that an enormous amount of work takes place beneath the surface and without mediators even recognizing what they are doing. But when they care about and why, that's hard work. And we can also look at conflict as having a spiritual dimension. That is, not a religious one, but a spiritual one in the sense of the quality of life energy that we experience when we are in conflict, that everyone experiences in conflict. And the inability to let go, not only of the conflict, but of the memory of what happened to us. And that inability to let go has a spiritual dimension, because a part of what every spiritual tradition teaches is the art of letting go, how it is possible to move from the past to the future. And so a very simple mediation intervention is, I understand that's what happened to you in the past. What would you like to see happen to you in the future? Um, Here's a simple argument. He yelled at me. No, I didn't. Yes, you did. No, I didn't. Yes, you did. That can go on forever, as those of us who have children know. But now there's a different question. Without deciding who yelled at who first, do either of you like being yelled at? And of course, the answer is no. Would you like to agree not to yell at each other in the future? And they will say yes. And all of a sudden, we have shifted in a magical way out of a endless uh, uh, of conflict into a future that is now um, one that is grounded in what it is that people really desire, what they want. But in order to do that, to be able to let go of what it is that happened to them. And that doesn't mean giving permission for it to happen again. It means transforming it into a way in which it will never happen again. Because the difficulty with you did, you didn't is it can always happen again. In fact, it's almost guaranteed to happen again. It is only when we make the fundamental shift from here's what happened to me to here's what I would like us to agree not to do to each other in the future, that it becomes possible to understand the transformative power of conflict resolution. And here's the assertion that I would like to make, and it is a audacious assertion. This same fundamental transformation can take place between nation states. It can take place between communities that hate each other. Now, having said that, it's important to acknowledge that this is not easy, that none of us understands exactly how to make this happen. And yet at the same time, we see that on every single scale, we are talking about human beings. And human beings respond to conflicts in similar ways, regardless of who they are. And now we can see what we have to fundamentally do is understand how conflict works on multiple scales. So let's begin with a simple idea. Here's the idea. Where exactly are conflicts located? Where are they? And here we can identify at least 3 and possibly 4 locations that every conflict takes place in. 1, internally and inside of us. Because everything everything that happens around us also happens inside of us. We are conscious beings. We are sensuous. We sense what is taking place in the world around us. And we resonate uh, with the vibrational sort of qualities that surround us. We clearly do this in a positive way with music, but we also do it with hatred, with anger, and we do it with stereotyping and prejudice. And now the question is, if we can understand that correctly, can we flip it and move it backwards? What do we do when there are conflicts that are entirely internal inside of us? Well, there are sets of techniques that we have available to us that we can talk about that allow us to touch conflicts in those areas. Conflict coaching is one of those. Petra, you have your hand up.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So this is so intense for me. I need time to process because I've known you a long time and I know the concepts. However, it is so intense,
Yes.
the information that I'm needing a little bit of time to process even each sentence. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention because this is
You're
very profound.
frozen. Yes. Thank you, Petra. We'll give you an opportunity to do that in just a moment.
Okay.
And in a way, this is why we have got a tape recorder going, so that for those of you who would like to, you can look at this afterwards and sort of think about it. And yes, this is intense stuff. That every conflict is intense in this way, and it is really difficult to figure out how to respond to that intensity in the moment, because the response that you are having to it is exactly the response that we all have to the conflicts that are around us. There is a very famous response to conflict that we all know. It is the fight or flight reflex. But we now know that it's not just fight or flight, it's fight, flight, or freeze. And so the freezing part is in part a response to just so much information come that it's very difficult to process it and know how to handle it and what to do about it. And it turns out that there is at least one more. So there's all fight, flight, freeze, and there's also fawn, which is try to curry favor with those who are about to attack you. The Anna Freud, who was Sigmund Freud's daughter, wrote about this in a little book that she wrote called The Ego and Its Mechanisms of Defense. And she called it Identification with the Oppressor. And there are people who will identify with the oppressor as a way of avoiding conflict. And then there's, I think, a fifth. And the fifth is the one we're doing here today. And the fifth I would call flock. Gather together, connect with one another. And I think this is also a kind of primitive response, instinctual response to conflict. So rather than taking a break at this point, I'd like us a moment to talk about this, and as soon as I introduced two more ideas. First, this is only the first location of conflict, is internally and inside of us. The second location is relationally and around us, that is between us So we have conflicts inside of us, and there are conflicts between us. And those conflicts exist in families, in marriages, in couples, in workplaces, in communities. They are created in part because each one of us is different and because communication is never 100% accurate. And because it's so easy to misunderstand each other. And yet, if we look at those relational conflicts, we can begin, we can begin to see patterns in how they arise, family patterns. Here's a question that you can ask in a relational conflict to find out whether this is a pattern. Have you ever experienced this kind of conflict before in your life? If so, when and with whom? And often you will find that it is something that began in the family of origin of the person who's involved. But if you just ask that relatively innocent question, you will oftentimes discover that there is something deeper that is taking place. And the third location of conflict is conflicts are also systemic, environmental, and exist around us. So we have conflicts that we experience and we have conflicts that we experience between us, and we have conflicts that we experience as a result of the environments in which we live, the workplaces, and the ways that those workplaces are structured, how feedback works in those workplaces, or most importantly, doesn't. And now there are a fundamentally different set of techniques. So we may use, for example, conflict coaching as a way of working with conflicts internally, but within people. And we may use regular mediation skills in connection with conflicts that are relational. But there are a different set of skills, for example, conflict resolution systems design, or public policy mediations, environmental mediations, large group, multi-stakeholder consensus building mediations that require a different set of techniques for working with large groups of people. And finally, I believe that there is a fourth area, and the fourth area has to do with culture and with our intentions in connections with how we would like to be treated, for example, what we would like the world to look like. And some of these can be subsumed in this third area, but others of them, I think, are a little bit different. And for these, we require another set of techniques. So part of what magic consists of is simply using the right technique for the right kind of conflict. Instead of thinking about mediation as something that you would do always and everywhere, think of it as a range that will shift significantly when they're used on a very tiny scale, and when they're used on a middle or meso scale, and when they are used on a large scale. And kind of what it is that I think every one of us begins with, and that is an effort to try to figure out what is really going on here. And here's what we discover, what we know from conflict resolution experience, what every mediator knows. And that is that conflict is about at least 90 to 95% and perhaps more under the surface of the issues people are arguing about. So two kids are arguing about who gets which piece of cake. All right, they can fight about this, or gets to sit where in the car traveling somewhere. The kids may be arguing about. That is one level on which they are arguing. But meanwhile, they're also arguing about sibling rivalry. That is about how about the competition between them for scarce resources. They're arguing about who's the favorite of the parents. They're arguing about uh, how they are talking to each other and how they would like to be treated by each other. They're arguing about getting to be themselves and not being seen as stereotyped by each other, or reduced to something simplistic that is insufficiently complex to represent what it is that they actually feel. They're fighting over freedom. They're fighting over a whole series of different things. And we don't actually know what they're fighting about until we do a needs assessment. What is the form of the needs assessment? In every location, it is a set of questions that we ask. And so what we discover is, well, Sigmund Freud described psychoanalysis as the talking cure. We can think of conflict resolution as the questioning cure. And part of what we are doing is we questions that invite people to tell us what it is that they are really concerned about, and ask them to look themselves to discover what they haven't even yet figured out that they are really concerned about. So if we just ask the question that I mentioned earlier, why do you care so much about this? We are going to elicit from that person some deeper um, uh, understanding of what is really going on for them than what they began with. Why does the cake matter to you so much? And when we ask that of the siblings, the two kids who are fighting with each other, they have to stop and think. And stopping and thinking is one of the elements that is going to help deal with the issue that Petra raised, which is the, sort of the sort of the difficulty of being in the presence of so much intensity and so much complexity that we simply have difficulty proceeding. So what do we do with this? Well, it turns out that we have, over many centuries, developed a series of skills. Here's one of them that I think all of you use. Count to 10. Very easy. Just stop and count to 10. What happens, however, when you are counting to 10? And happens is neurophysiologically in your brain, the little place that conflicts are being evaluated and threats are being detected, which is called the amygdala, which is Greek for almond, right, Alexia? So these little almond-shaped centers in your brain are doing what they are supposed to do, which is hijacking the brain and converting it into an instrument for fight or flight. And what that means is freeze proceeds automatically because the what you're essentially shutting down is the prefrontal cortex. And the message from the amygdala is, you guys can think whatever you want, but we are taking over here. And we're going to be directing at a speed that is faster than the speed of logical thought. we are going to be more rapidly processing information coming into us. And in order to do that, we've got to shut the rest of this stuff down. And that's what we revert to. And we revert to it while we are sitting there talking to our spouse or our coworkers or listening to our boss, or watching whatever it is that's happening on TV. All of these are hardwired physiologically. And what else does the amygdala do? It sends a message to the adrenal glands to increase the production of adrenaline. And adrenaline then goes to your muscles in your arms so you can hit, and the muscles in your legs so you can run. And you're now prepared for whatever conflict is going to bring to you. But now there's a second fundamental pathway within the brain, and that is we have the amygdala and we have the release of adrenaline as a neurotransmitter. There is another neurotransmitter, which is oxytocin. And oxytocin is called the bonding chemical. And what we do when we receive oxytocin is we tend to stop and become more empathetic. Oxytocin breaks down adrenaline. Adrenaline breaks down oxytocin. And so we have two forces inside of us that are fluctuating back and forth. And these dual pathways guarantee that there will be full employment for mediators forever. Because we're never, ever going to escape our physiological destiny. We have two hemispheres of the brain, we've got two pathways, and as a result of that, we are able to see things digitally and interpret them in digital ways. But if we think, for example, of how digital logic proceeds, if we look at the binary sort of language of computers, there are zeros and ones. And that in order to be able to process a computer are zeros and ones. But if we ask a different question, how many numbers are there between 0 and 1? The answer is an infinite number. And now let's go back to the origin of conflict. What is it really about? It's about, on the one, more truths. No two, no conflict. And number two, it's about assuming that there is a single correct answer, that there is one path forward, that there is one outcome that everybody has to accept, and that outcome is either or. And the possibility of there being a both and comes later. That's what the mediator is. The mediator is the representative, the ambassador of both and, as opposed to either or. And that's a kind of magic, because everything has shifted. So, is it then that we, when we think about conflict, what is it really that we are talking about? And I think essentially, well, let's take a step back. What determines the nature of mediation? What is mediation? And here are two answers. One, mediation is a informal conversation that is designed to solve a problem. Sounds good. But it doesn't tell us very much about how to go about solving that problem. And secondly, we can say that mediation is an operation that we perform on a conflict, a reverse operation. an operation that either minimizes the intensity of that conflict, um, or reverses it, or stops it in its tracks, or eliminates it, or prevents it from happening at all. But mediation is fundamentally the nature is determined by the nature of the conflict. Or to go back to the first definition, if it's an informal problem-solving conversation, then the nature of our conversation is going to be determined by the nature of the problem. Problem, simple conversation, simple solution. Complex problem, complex conversation, complex solution. And most of the conflicts that we are going to be facing in our lives are complex, not simple. And now we can see that one of the definitions of dictatorship, autocracy, oligarchy, tyranny on a large scale political level is the simplification of problems and the simplification of political conversations so that only either or exist. Both and do not. What's required for both and? Dialogue. The two opposite things have to come together and talk to each other. And that's what mediation is. And for this reason, mediation is always disfavored by dictators, oligarchs, autocrats, and tyrants, because they want the win. They want to be able to be victorious, and being victorious can only mean somebody else's defeat. But here's what we know from conflict resolution. We can all win. It's possible. It's what we call a win-win outcome. How do we get there? Roger Fisher and William Ury gave us a very nice description in their book, Getting to Yes. And there are a series of different things that we can do. One of which is simply having the attitude of moving from binary digital options into analog, diverse, a multiplicity of options. And as soon as we do that and we open up by brainstorming, what are all the different ways that we might think about this problem or go about solving it? What we will discover is that there is not a single correct answer. But for power, there has to be a single correct answer, because power is a zero-sum game. And if you want to read about this, you can read the book by von Neumann and Morgenstern on the nature of games, certainly about economic games. But what we discover is that it doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. In a zero-sum game, if there's a total of 10, if I get 7, you have to get 3. But for me to get 8, you have to get 2. It's the only way it works. But it is possible to, in the language of Fisher and Ury, expand the pie. Look at other things that people may want. So if one of the reasons why the kids are fighting over the piece of cake is that they don't feel respected by the other child, let's talk about respect and what they can do so that both of them feel respected. Okay, so now let's stop for a moment and take a look at what we are talking about. Here's the question for you. And let's see, I'm not sure if we can do this because we've got a number of people who are not, I'm not sure if they're actually with us or not. I see faces, but I'm not sure if everyone is actually here. So I was thinking I could put people in small groups. Oh, okay. So if you are here, if you could sort of show that you're here on your audio, on your video, so we can see how many people we actually have. Great. Okay. Terrific. All right. So, Sergey, is it possible to put people into small groups, or would you like me to do that?
Uh, Either or. Would you like me to do it, or you
Uh, well, either way, let's see. I'm not
can make it?
sure if I'm a co-host or host. Yeah, let's create breakout rooms. Okay. Hi, Carl. Good to see you. Okay, so I think we have now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Well, let's create 3 breakout rooms. And we're going to let people choose their rooms. And here's the assignment. What I'd like you to do in the room is to have a conversation about the kinds of conflicts that you are working with. And that may be family conflicts, it may be marital conflicts, it may be community conflicts, it may be large scale, even political conflicts, whatever level that you are working on. Actually, yeah, so it looks like we have 16 possible. So, okay, so I'm gonna close rooms and now we'll create 4 rooms.
Are
Okay.
you doing it?
Okay, and then what I'd like you to do is for each person to say, what is the most powerful um, uh, method or technique or skill that you have experienced in working with those conflicts in those areas. And if you haven't actually mediated, you can talk about what's worked for you as a party. What is one thing that people did that was the most powerful thing that they could do? Let's show 3 rooms. Okay. Well, we have 4 rooms, so we're going to let you choose which room you're going to be in, and we're going to just take 15 minutes to do this. So we'll come back. It's now a half hour at the half hour. We'll come back at just a little bit after, a quarter after. Does this sound okay? And then what I'd like you to do is for one person to keep notes on what it is that the most useful technique was that people mentioned, the most useful method that someone used. What was it? And then copy those and paste them into the chat so everybody can read them.
And
Sound good? Yes, Lynn.
quick question, I see 3 rooms, not 4.
I know I put 4, but it didn't do it. So I think I have to close all the rooms.
Would you like Sergey and I to make those?
Sure, if you can do that. For some reason, it only created 3. Oh, add room. There we go.
There you go.
Got it.
All right, so I'll go ahead and put people in because I pretty much know everybody. So, and then I'll join you. So let's do it this way.
Okay, so if everyone can join a room,
Okay.
I
I don't have the-
Fine, and
Yeah.
then
so once again, the instructions are to talk a little bit for a moment, to introduce yourself by saying what kind of work you are either focused on or you want to focus on. And then what is the technique that has worked best in your experience? One that
Okay.
I'll open the rooms in just a moment, folks. Let me just get people signed. I'm doing it real quick. Okay. So let's see. People should be moving now into the rooms. Ken, do you want to join any particular room? How about I put you in room 1?
Your audio, you're muted.
I was mid-sentence in the group,
Oh, no.
wrong button. We were having such a good conversation,
Wonderful.
right?
Yes, unfortunately, we have to end in less than 10 minutes.
Yeah,
So I felt
No, it
like
was
I
good.
really
It
needed
was
to come
good.
back. Yeah, but I'm glad that was useful.
Oh, very useful, very.
Great. So what was useful about it? Was that a useful conversation for everyone? And if so, what made it useful?
I think so, absolutely. Well, shall I start?
Sure.
All right. A useful conversation indeed, Ken. So we had some very experienced mediators, some less experienced mediators, but it seems like everybody learned something from somebody else. So randomly, without attaching any names to the advice, is asking questions, being flexible and adapt to the situation. It's the old thing of fitting the process to the problem and not the other way around, but be adaptable because every conflict is different. You've got to be on high alert and make the necessary switches where possible. Be honest as a mediator, but also encourage parties to be honest. Listening, gather information, not just from what people say, but also their body language, their nonverbal communication, the little cues they give us, which actually often hide the real story because the body never lies. Words do, but the body never lies. So one's got to be alert to the entire message that you get from somebody. And then being flexible in terms of the process, adapt as necessary. Use something like Glassel's theory of conflict escalation to illustrate to the parties what might happen if they continued along the current path into the so-called abyss. And then asking them where they would like to be, where would they like to go back to avoid mutual self-destruction, mutual destruction, and what will it take to get them back there? That often is a bit of a reality check that might get parties back to some more decent conversations. So that's, I think, in a nutshell. But please, if my group
Excellent.
wants to add something, please do.
Excellent. We don't have time to hear from every group, but that is really helpful. And so what I'd like to do is to ask whoever took notes to whatever their ideas are in the chat, and then we can preserve the chat with some of those ideas in it. Here was the reason for this exercise, so that you would discover that you all have things to contribute to one another, that everybody has a different idea about how to do this, and each idea has something valuable and useful in it. That there is not a single way of approaching mediation. That given an opportunity to stop and think about it, every group of people can come up with creative ideas for how to get out of this mess. And that extends to our conflicts as well. So I have, as I said, done this many thousands of times, often with groups, hundreds and hundreds of sessions within groups. Not once has anyone said, I'm sorry, we haven't been able to come up with any creative ideas here. Not once. So here's what this means. It means that this is a collective enterprise. This is a shared activity. And we do better when we share what we know than if we just assume that our lessons are the only ones that matter. So the point of this is to create reflective practice groups within your community where you periodically ask questions like this. What worked for you? What's one thing that you saw that was just absolutely miraculous? And then somebody else is going to do it slightly differently. And it's going to work for one person, it's not going to work for somebody else. The easiest example of that is humor. Some people can use humor very effectively, and if other people try it, it will be insulting. So the second part of this was about the value of stepping back from the conversation that you were having to reflect on it, to think about what it is that you have learned so far. And you can do this in the middle of a mediation. You can, for example, just say in the middle of a mediation, I'd like to stop our conversation right now and get some feedback from you about how well I'm doing. How is this process working for you? Is anything I could do that would make it work better for you? Anything that either of you could do that you could help each other with? Do you have any suggestions for each other? And notice how fundamentally the conversation changes when you do that. You can also, if you aren't do that verbally, you can do it in writing by assigning people as homework, or you can even say, I'm going to take about a 10-minute break here, but I'd like to assign you some homework while I'm taking a break. And the homework is, I'd like you to write down, each of you, 3 to 5 potential solutions to this conflict that you think would be acceptable to the other side. And when I come back, I'm going to ask you to read them to each other. And now listen to what happens. It's incredible. They will come up with solutions, and oftentimes one of them will be totally acceptable to the other side. And guess what? They did it themselves. Where did that come from? What was that magic about? How did it happen? And the answer is it was there all the time. So there's a wonderful, let's see if I can actually find it here. I'm going to have to, it's going to take me a second here. Okay. So here we are. Okay. So here is William Butler Yeats. The world is full of magic things, patiently waiting for our senses to grow sharper. I think that's the fundamental idea. And then, of course, we also have a beautiful statement from Albert Einstein, who said, there are 2 ways to live your life. One is as though nothing is a miracle, and the other is as though everything is. And I think in mediation, we do the second. We are looking for those miracles. And this is how Nikos Kazantzaki's statement becomes true. By carrying within us in our imagination, the idea that it is possible for them to resolve their disputes. That is not a neutral intention. It is one that impacts the parties. They pick up from us that we believe that they can do it. And all of a sudden, somehow, they can. So this is what we do with children. And when it comes to conflict, we are all children. So it's best to just think what would work with a 3-year-old and try that. And the chances are good that it's going to be successful. So today is about a kind of overview of conflict. Tomorrow is about resolution and about transformation and transcendence, how we get there. How do we make this magic into something that is deeply, profoundly consequential for the part? How do we help them learn from their conflicts? And please come tomorrow with whatever questions you may have. And we will start with those at the beginning, or you can raise them at any point. So I'm hopeful that this is helpful to you. If you have other suggestions for how we can do this tomorrow, let me know. This is going by very, very rapidly, but we'll do our best to make this useful for you.
Thank you, Ken.
Okay, thank you, Lynn.
You guys so much.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Sergey.
everybody.
Excellent.
Thank
Bye,
you,
everybody.
everybody.
Tomorrow.
Thank you, Sergey.
Thank you.
And then,
Sorry.
thank
Thank you,
you.
Ken.
Very nice.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Uh,
you.
yes, a pleasure. Bye-bye.